Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another episode of Buha's Block. On today's show, we're going to be doing part 2 of our 2-part mailbag. You guys asked almost 40 questions, and I'm trying to get to as many of them as possible. On today's show, we're going to be covering the ideal offseason for the Lakers, ranking center targets based on how realistic they are and their fit within LA's schemes. LeBron being unlikely to take a pay cut, what LeBron leaving would do for LA's cap situation, and more. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. All right, first question from @KingRalph. 1996, your best case scenario for the Lakers this offseason. This is the multi-million-dollar question for the Lakers this offseason, and I'm going to try to keep it realistic because, of course, if they can land Giannis Antetokounmpo and get that superstar pairing with Luka for the foreseeable future, then that is a great outcome. That is the ideal outcome for the Lakers offseason. But I'm going to try to keep it realistic with what I think could actually happen with the Lakers' assets and roster building tools. And before I break it down, I want to make a couple of quick assumptions here. One, Luka will be extending with the Lakers this summer, and maybe it's a shorter extension, 2+1, just because that would allow him to opt out after year 10 and get that 35% max. But Luka is extending in this scenario. And then two, LeBron is either opting in and exercising his player option, or he is opting out and re-signing on a 1+1 at a similar figure. As we reported at The Athletic a couple of weeks ago, it is unlikely that LeBron is going to be taking a pay cut. Maybe he takes a haircut on that figure to keep the Lakers under the first or second apron, depending on where they are. But I don't see LeBron taking a double-digit million discount to help the Lakers roster build. So we're going to make a couple of assumptions here. Of Luka signs the extension, LeBron is a Laker in the $50-ish million range. And so with that out of the way, let's get into actual roster moves. So I think the first thing has to be trading for a starting center. I think the Lakers have to trade for a center and not sign one, because if you look at free agency, the realistic options, guys like Brook Lopez, Clint Capela, Steven Adams, all those guys are 31 years old or older, which I think is a bit too old for the Luka and Austin timeline. None of those guys are the vertical lob threat that you would want with Luka. Clint Capela is no longer that player. Maybe Luka can unlock some of that and get him back to the Houston or early Atlanta days, but he has not been that player for a couple of years in terms of his finishing and his dunk frequency. And he was doing so while playing with Trae Young, who is one of the better pick and roll practitioners and better lob passers in the league. I do like him as a potential backup, and in the worst case scenario, a placeholder starter. But we're talking about the ideal outcome here. So it would not be Clint Capela starting. It would actually be him coming off of the bench as a high-end backup. So I think if the Lakers can land Nic Claxton or Daniel Gafford, either one of those guys, they're both in their mid-20s. Claxton's 25, going to be 26. Gafford is 26. So they fit the Luka timeline. We've seen Gafford have success with Luka, be a starting center on a group that made the finals. So we have proof of concept with that one. Nic Claxton, I think, is arguably better than Daniel Gafford. I think it's relatively close, especially after I dug into some of the film and dug into some of the numbers. It's not as big of a gap as I anticipated. I think the one key difference between those two guys, which I will be touching on later in the mailbag, is the role and the minutes and the starting. And just Claxton has been more available and just been more of a key starter rotation player in Brooklyn compared to Gafford in Washington and Dallas. He's often been in that like 20 to 24 minute range, which I think if you're going to be giving up a first round pick, you want a guy who can be playing closer to 28 to 32 minutes. And I have more confidence in Claxton holding up and being able to do that rather than Gafford. Now, if it's on a per minute or per possession basis, I actually might even lean Gafford, especially when factoring in the contract. But either way, I think they're relatively close. And and both would be significant upgrades over Jackson Hayes. I think there are pathways to getting these guys without having to give up a starter or even a top 6 player on the roster. So with Gafford, could you do something like Gabe Vincent or Maxi Kleber? Both guys are on expiring contracts, with maybe a Dalton Connect to salary match and then a first round pick. And with Claxton, he is making $25.3 million next year, but it is a descending contract. So looking at it, it's 25.3 to 23.1 to 20.9. So could you do something like Gabe and Kleber and Dalton and a first round pick for Nic Claxton? So I think that is the first move, that you get the Claxton, you get the Gafford, and I think that plugs that center spot. Then you have a decision to make. You can either use the non-taxpayer mid-level exception starting at about $14 million, but that hard caps you at the first apron, or you can use the $5.7 million taxpayer mid-level exception, and that hard caps you at the second apron. On paper, you would say use the $14 million non-taxpayer mid-level exception, but being hard capped at the first apron is tricky, especially for a Lakers team that right now projects to be pushing up against the first apron. Depending on how free agency plays out, they should be about $6 to $7 million below it, but that's with about 11 players under contract. So you need to get to 14 entering the season. So they would probably be right there at the first apron or a little bit below, above it. So can you shed some salary and figure out a way to get under that? Yes, but there are some restrictions that come with being hard capped at the first apron. If you're the Lakers, you have to be open to using that and exploring that pathway. But I think using the $5.7 million taxpayer mid-level exception and being hard capped at the second apron, that is probably a more realistic pathway. Looking at their roster, if you get the Claxton or the Gafford, and let's just say for argument's sake it's Claxton, because I think he's probably a bit more realistic than Gafford. I think the next positions that you need to address are either wing or backup center, and you could use that $5.7 million to add the best possible center. Can you get a Clint Capela? Can you get a Steven Adams? Are those guys in the non-taxpayer mid-level range, or is their market a little bit colder? Can you get them for the 5.7? Maybe you take a gamble on a Day'Ron Sharpe, who is a restricted free agent, and you put him as your backup 5, and he solidifies that position. So I think there's some options there with the center spot in terms of the way that they could go, assuming they get that solid starting option, or they can go the way of trying to upgrade the perimeter, either on the wings or in the backcourt. But going through it, it's slim pickings, especially in this price range. Can they get a Bruce Brown? Can they get a Gary Payton II? Can they get an Amir Coffey? Like it gets great. Like we're not talking about high level, starting level options, but can you get one of those guys for potentially the taxpayer MLE or a minimum contract? I think Brown and Payton are probably more in that taxpayer MLE range. I mean, I assume they'd want even more. They'd want the non-taxpayer MLE. I don't know if they're quite there. Maybe Brown is, but potentially for the taxpayer MLE. I think these three are guys who have proven that they can play rotation minutes for good teams. They can contribute to winning. Bruce Brown won a championship with the Nuggets as a key bench player. Gary Payton won a championship with the Warriors as a key bench player. Amir Coffey has been a key bench guy for the Clippers over the last few years. So they've all established themselves as winning players to varying degrees. And I think there are some clear things that those guys can bring to the table. None of them are perfect, but you're also offering them a $5.7 million taxpayer MLE. If I were to summarize this, I would say Luka extends, LeBron either opts in or opts out and resigns on a 1+1, likely going to be in that $50+ million range. You get DFS to also either opt in or opt out and resign at a similar figure. And then you go get a Nic Claxton or a Daniel Gafford as a starting center. And then you add either a good backup or another solid perimeter guard or wing type to bolster the rotation to 7 or 8. And then you try to do your best with minimum contracts. So I think that's the most realistic path for the Lakers. If I was saying the best case scenario, it's probably something like, can you get like a Nic Claxton and a Steven Adams, and then maybe a Gary Payton and Amir Coffey is available for the minimum, and just the market, like similar to what we saw with Gary Trent Jr. last year, the market plays out a certain way where teams are reluctant to spend the non-taxpayer MLE because of the first apron, hard capping, or even hesitant to use the taxpayer MLE because of the second apron. And some guys fall through the cracks, and the Lakers can offer 2 to 3 minimum guys legitimate roles within the rotation and leverage that for those guys to get the exposure. And look at Lonnie Walker or Malik Monk or some of these guys and what they were able to do after having those moments with the Lakers. Like it can be the launching pad to extending your career or getting a bigger contract. But that is tentatively my ideal Lakers offseason. Next question from @JNoteMusic. If LeBron is supposedly not willing to take a pay cut next season, how possible is it to build a bench that can produce every game on top of a starting center? Shout out to Jay. He's one of the OGs with the Late Night Gang and everything we're building with this channel. So I would argue that what I just laid out is probably the pathway to what you are asking. If LeBron is not going to take a pay cut, as we reported at The Athletic, I think it is trading for a starting center and then using one of the two taxpayer or non-taxpayer mid-level exceptions to either add a backup center or another perimeter player, be it a wing or a guard. And then it's going to be a bunch of minimum guys. So it is going to be difficult for the Lakers to replenish their depth and to dramatically improve it. If you're talking about like high level scoring players off the bench, it gets a little dicey, and unless they are going to use one of those exceptions on that type of player, or they strike gold with minimum contracts, like it gets tricky in terms of building out a roster that way. So it is going to be a challenge for the Lakers to add high level bench players. I think they have one move in them with a trade, one move in them with an exception, and then the rest is likely going to be vet minimum guys. So it's not going to be easy for them to find a bunch of depth, especially with them having limited roster building tools at their disposal. So this is going to be a challenge. I am personally of the belief that bench scoring is a little bit overrated in terms of how important it is. I think you just need depth, and I think you need guys who can help on both sides of the ball. It is nice to have that 6th man of the year type candidate coming off your bench. It is nice to have some bench scoring and guys who can help swing a shift or a quarter or a half or even a game off the bench. But I think there are more ways to do that than just scoring. And I don't know if you meant scoring specifically with your question. I just know that that's a big thing, the Lakers and their bench scoring, and that's a question I often get asked or see people talking about. But it is going to be difficult for the Lakers to build a proper bench. I would contend that with the rotation spots available, they can find some vet minimum guys to entice by saying, hey, if you come here, even if you take a little bit of a pay cut, you can be the 8th or 9th man, and that can help vault you into a bigger contract next summer. That's the carrot that they could dangle in front of a lot of these guys. You're going to have a lot of visibility with Luka and LeBron and JJ and the Lakers brand. All that stuff is going to help you potentially get your next contract. So I think they need to be a way station for the next contract for a lot of guys, and it's a mutually beneficial partnership. Those guys get a certain level of exposure being minimum guys on the Lakers and being rotation guys on the Lakers, and then the Lakers get additional value out of having guys who are non-minimum players on minimum contracts. So I think that's probably the most realistic way for this to play out in LA's favor. Next question from @Andrew Barnett 5010. Hypothetically, Bron opts out and goes to Dallas with AD and Kyrie for the vet minimum. Are they the title favorite? How much would that help with our salary cap and the ability to sign a quality center? What star would you target to pair with Luka? We got 3 questions here from Andrew. I'm going to start with the first one. I'm re-recording my answer to the first part of this question, the Dallas part specifically, just because I recorded this before Dallas won the lottery, and we'll be selecting Cooper Flagg and adding him to the core of Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, Derek Lively, etc. So quick thoughts with Cooper Flagg set to be a Dallas Maverick, and in your hypothetical LeBron going there on a vet minimum contract, I think they would be a title threat with that trio of LeBron, AD, and Cooper Flagg. You also have Derek Lively, PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, Klay Thompson. You have a lot of firepower, a lot of size. I think there are some perimeter defensive concerns. They still don't have a primary ball handler, with Kyrie Irving set to miss most of next season. You can run the ball, obviously, through LeBron, but I think as we've seen in LA, he's wanted to play off the ball a bit more than he did earlier in his career. So I still think you need to find a placeholder ball handler, which is something that Dallas is going to have to figure out. But I think they would be a title contender, assuming that they can stay healthy. LeBron will be turning 41. AD will be entering his mid-30s, and you have some injury-prone guys on their roster. But I mean, I would not put them as the title favorite. If Kyrie was there, I think you can make the case that Kyrie, LeBron, AD, Cooper Flagg, like that team could arguably be the best team in the league. That is the best quartet in the league, and that group could be the championship favorites. But that is purely hypothetical because Kyrie is going to miss most, if not all, of next season, and I do not see LeBron going there on a minimum contract. Then how would that help with the Lakers salary cap and the ability to sign a quality center? Pulling it up, I just wrote a story at The Athletic about the Lakers. It was an off-season overview, so I recommend you all check that out for those who are subscribed to The Athletic. But looking at it, the Lakers have 8 players with guaranteed contracts for next season: Luka, Rui, Austin, Jared Vanderbilt, Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleba, Dalton Knecht, and Bronny James. That adds up to $118.2 million, which is about 76% of the projected salary cap of $154.6 million. So quick math there, that's about $38 million under the salary cap. So if the Lakers try to clear the max cap space, which would be LeBron walking, they let Dorian Finney-Smith walk, which I don't see happening, but we'll just say this hypothetically, they do not pick up the team option on Jordan Goodwin, and they waive Shake Milton, and then they rescind the rights to Jackson Hayes, Markieff Morris, and Alex Len, and then 6 minimum cap holds, which gets a little complicated. I'm not trying to nerd out too much with the cap stuff, but we'll say that's about $12 million. That's probably being generous, but all of that would put them at about $130 million in salary, with about $25 million in cap space. And again, these are rough estimates here, but they can maybe get to like 25 to 30 million in cap space, and you can sign a Myles Turner if you really want a Myles Turner. You could sign a Naz Reid if you really want a Naz Reid, but you are losing LeBron, you are losing Dorian Finney-Smith, you are losing Jordan Goodwin, and you are adding a Myles Turner or a Naz Reid. Otherwise, like there's not really any other impact free agents. Quickly looking at the list, LeBron has a player option, so in this scenario, he's going to Dallas. Fred VanVleet has a team option. Kyrie has a player option he's likely to pick up. James Harden, same thing. Chris Middleton, same thing. Julius Randle's an interesting one, but he has a $30.9 million player option. So if he opts out, he would be wanting more. And I don't see the Lakers clearing more than like $30 million in cap space. So Julius Randle probably isn't realistic there. John Collins has a player option he's likely to pick up. Then we get into the Brook Lopez, Clint Capela, Bruce Brown, Malcolm Brogdon, Myles Turner range, where I like Turner the most out of all those guys, but they're not LeBron James, and that is a significant step down for the Lakers in terms of top-end talent on the roster. In terms of the Lakers' salary options, it's not looking great. It's maybe $25 to $30 million in cap space again. I'm making some rough estimates here because I just don't see this happening. And they can sign a Myles Turner or a Naz Reid. Those are the center targets I think could be available within that price range, maybe even a little bit less, and they have a little bit more cap space. But if you are, again, swapping out LeBron for Myles Turner or LeBron for Naz Reid, your team is getting worse. And then final part of this question, what star would you target to pair with Luka? Well, at that point, you are not replacing LeBron with a star in free agency. And at that point, it becomes about signing the best player possible and then looking ahead toward summer of 2026 when Austin will likely be a free agent. Luka could be a free agent depending on what happens with his extension, and you have some more roster flexibility at that point to potentially sign someone. And there are some much bigger names and better players in free agency that summer. And just thinking about Luka and what would fit with him, I would want a star who's good defensively. I think that's going to be a big part of this moving forward. Is can you get a big man like Giannis? Sure. Giannis would fit great with Luka, in my opinion, or a high-level two-way wing who can run two-man game with Luka, also defend guys credibly on the perimeter and space the floor, be a high-level three-point shooter. So I think that there are lots of guys that can fit with Luka as that second star or co-star, however you want to deem it. I would say the one player archetype to stay away from would probably be a small point guard, and probably a point guard in general. I don't think Luka necessarily needs one, but like a Trae Young type, a LaMelo type, you don't need to pair that with Luka. But outside of that player archetype, I think any type of wing or big would fit well with Luka. But I don't think you are getting that guy this summer. I think that is going to have to be a 2026 or 2027 situation for the Lakers if LeBron were to leave to Dallas. So I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think LeBron's leaving for a vet minimum contract. But if that does happen, the Lakers are in trouble because they are not just going to be able to replace LeBron with Star X in free agency. They don't have the cap space to go get Star X. Star X isn't even necessarily available in free agency. And I think they would have to do some type of placeholder move or adding a Turner, a Reed, which would help your center spot. But now you don't have that true number two on the roster. And then you need to go find that second star either in trade or free agency, most likely in 2026 or later. Next one from @JP Salazar73. Who among Claxton, Kessler, Turner, and Gafford would be the best fit for next season? And who is the most realistic? I will answer the most realistic part first. I would rank these guys in terms of most realistic to least realistic as Claxton 1, Gafford 2, Turner 3, and Kessler 4. I think that Claxton is the most realistic because of his contract as a guy making in the mid-20s on a rebuilding team. That just makes you a natural trade target. A lot of teams are going to want Claxton this summer, especially with teams trying to bolster their front courts, their center spots, looking at how important size has been both in the regular season and in the playoffs. I think Claxton is going to be a hot commodity this summer. Second is Gafford. And I would argue that Gafford might be the guy most likely to be moved overall. But when you factor in the Lakers and Mavericks recent trade history with the Luka AD trade and the backlash that the front office and ownership got, I don't see them being particularly willing to help the Lakers out and give Luka the center that he needs and wants. There's still a way to make this work. I think if you offer Gabe Dalton and a first, I think that is close to fair value for Daniel Gafford. But I think Dallas might be hesitant to help the Lakers out, to help Luka out, and to get some more backlash from their fans. 3 for me is Turner. Turner wants to be paid more this summer, so that is a factor as well. But Turner, I think, is likely going to stay in Indiana. But because he's an unrestricted free agent, I always think there is some wiggle room with that. Likely have to be through sign and trade with the Lakers, which would hard cap them at the first apron. And then number 4 has to be Kessler, just because of the asking price that Utah has had for him. They have wanted 2+ first-round picks for him for the past year plus, and Dalton Connect and a first is not enough for them. So I don't think the Lakers have the draft capital. The Lakers only have 1 tradable first round pick. I think I've made that clear up to this point, but want to clarify that again. I've seen people saying they have 2 tradable first round picks. They technically have 2 first round picks that are eligible to be traded, but they can only trade one of them due to the Stepien rule. So they can trade either 2031 or 2032, but not both. So they have 1 tradable first round pick, and that's not going to be enough to get Walker Kessler's. Now, in terms of best fit, that's a totally different conversation. I would say it's close to the inverse of this list of who's realistic. I would say the best fit, in my opinion, is Kessler, number 1. He checks the most boxes of being an elite finisher around the rim. He is a good vertical lob threat. He is been a good vertical lob threat despite play with some limited ball handlers and playmakers in Utah. He's not played with a Luka Doncic type. I can only imagine what that would look like with him playing next to Luka. But Kessler can finish around the basket. He has improved with his hook shots, with his floaters, with his soft touch, or within 6 to 10 feet or so. So I think best rebounder on this list easily. I think he's the best rim protector on this list as well. And when factoring in what the Lakers need, he's also 23, so he could grow with Luka long term. He's similar to Mark Williams in terms of profile, but is a much better rebounder, rim protector, defensive player, and doesn't come with the same health risks. So I think Kessler is the best fit. He can be that vertical lob threat. He can be that defensive anchor and also provides a certain level of size and physicality. For me, 2 would be Claxton. And I think it's close between Claxton and Gafford. But as I mentioned earlier in the mailbag, I think a big thing has been Claxton playing starter level minutes, high 20s, even close to 30 minutes for 3 straight seasons. Also been a bit healthier than Gafford over the last few seasons. But Gafford has been a guy since becoming a starter who typically plays 20 to 24 minutes. And part of that circumstance, for sure, being in Dallas, you had Derek Lively last year. You ended up trading for AD, but even the season before, you had Lively, and they were splitting some time there. There's just a lack of a sample size in terms of him being able to play high 20s, low 30s minutes. And I think if I'm investing a first-round pick and trading for a center, and if I'm looking at what the Lakers ideally need, I want the guy who can play a bit more and be more reliable in that sense. And from a health perspective, Claxton has been the healthiest of these 4 players over the last 3 seasons. So I would put Claxton second, I would put Gafford third, and I would put Turner fourth. And to be clear, I don't think Turner is the worst of these 4. I think Turner is arguably the best of these 4, or at worst, the second best of these 4. I think he's better than Claxton, and I think he's better than Gafford. And from a production standpoint, you could argue Kessler. I think Kessler versus Turner is close, but Turner has like the pedigree. He's going to be making the most money potentially out of this group, depending on what type of contract he gets this summer. Claxton is making 25, so Turner would have to make more than that. But like, there's you could talk me into Turner being the best guy, and I would probably agree with that argument. The issue here is Luka loves a pick and roll rim runner, a vertical lob threat, and Turner is by far the worst of these 4 players in terms of his finishing, in terms of being a lob threat, in terms of being a vertical floor spacer. So while he's the best shooter by far and a pick and pop threat, he can kind of do that Porzingis role that we know JJ loves Boston and their offense and their style of play. And I'm sure he would love to have Myles Turner as, in that Porzingis role. The issue is just compared to Claxton, Kessler, and Gafford, he is by far the worst pick and roll rim running vertical lob spacer. He's also the worst rebounder among this group. And I think rebounding is a big thing for the Lakers, looking at an area that they need to improve on. You could argue he's the worst rim protector. I think it's probably close between him and Claxton, but I think Kessler's the best. Then you could make a case for any of the other 3 as the second best. But when looking at the boxes that Turner checks, like from a scoring perspective, best scorer. From a shooting perspective, best shooter. But the Lakers are looking for more than just that from the center spot. The other 3 guys all offer better combined skill sets compared to Turner. So to be clear, I think all 4 of these guys would be awesome for the Lakers. I think any of the 4 would be a win for the offseason in terms of adding that solid to really good starting caliber center. So if they can get any of these 4, I think it's a really, really good offseason. But in terms of most realistic, again, I would have it Claxton, Gafford, Turner, Kessler. And in terms of best fit, I would have it Kessler, Claxton, Gafford, Turner. Next question from @springmagic-PO2YJ. How is LeBron's injury, and do you think it could affect his next season, or is there plenty of time to heal? Got me worried since he's not attending the Met Gala. I don't have much to add to the public reporting with LeBron's injury. I know it's a grade 2 MCL in his left knee, and the timetable is 3 to 5 weeks. That was about a week ago or so at this point. So 2 to 4 weeks from now, plenty of time till next season. We are in not even officially at the midway point of May yet. So we got another 4.5 months until the start of the season and training camp and media day and all that. So plenty of time for LeBron to heal. I would not be concerned with this. If anything, I think it was a good thing that he prioritized his health and did not go to the Met Gala. I think I wouldn't read too much into it. I get the reason for concern and I understand it. He's 40, going to be 41 at the end of the year. And this is not the type of injury that he ideally would be starting the offseason with. But him getting a bit of a break for his body, I think could end up being a good thing. LeBron is never a guy I'm concerned with in terms of conditioning or game shape or whatnot. So he'll take a break. I'm sure he'll still be working out and staying in shape while he is resting the knee. Then once it's cleared, he will ramp up and get back to being LeBron. I don't think this is something that is going to linger into training camp, into the preseason, into next season. I think it is something that he will have a full off season to recover from and be fine going into next year. Next one from @AngeloT8848. Jovan Buha. Where does this season rank in your favorite LeBron seasons that you've watched/covered? Championship year aside, this was up there for me with the Cleveland 2.0 years. This is a fun one. I'm going to give you a couple of different answers. In terms of my favorite seasons that I've covered of LeBron, I've been covering LeBron since the 2020-2021 season, so I've covered him for 5 years. I would put this season third for me, behind 2020-2021. That was my first year covering LeBron. That was the year coming off of the championship. And I contend that had he stayed healthy and Solomon Hill had never happened, he would have been in contention for MVP. I think at that there was a point where he was the betting favorite or close to being the betting favorite, like midway through the season. So I think that was like his last real shot to win MVP. And that was derailed by injury and then the Lakers losing in round 1 due to AD getting injured against Phoenix. But that year, first year covering him, getting to watch LeBron up close. Like I had covered LeBron in terms of like covering his games before, but I'd never been able to watch him up close for, I would say 82 games, but that year we didn't travel until the playoffs. So it was 41 home games plus the preseason, but watching him up close for 45 games, that was special. And for those who don't know, growing up, I was a huge LeBron fan. He's one of my favorite players of all time. So just getting to do that was special for me. So I would say 2020, 2021 has to be my favorite LeBron season that I've covered. Then I would say my second favorite season that I've covered with LeBron would be 2022-23. That is the season the Lakers made the Western Conference Final. So seeing LeBron in the playoffs, deepest playoff run I've covered with him. I think that LeBron, like some of those performances were my favorite. And then I would put this one third. I would put the 2023-24 LeBron fourth, and then 2021-22 fifth, just because that was my least favorite season I've ever covered, was the 2021-22 Lakers, for some obvious reasons, I would say. But that would be my favorite in terms of the seasons I've covered. If we're talking LeBron's entire career and what I've watched, this season is not going to be high for me, to be completely honest, because you got those early prime Cleveland years, I would say from like 2006, 2007, the 48 special in Detroit where he scores 25 straight points, leads that team to the finals. 08-09, he wins his first MVP. 2009, 2010, wins his second MVP. The Heatles years, and then going back to Cleveland and winning a title there, and the 3-1 comeback. So I would say there's easily 6 to 8 years off the top of my head that I would put ahead of this, if not potentially more. So I would have this past season in the middle of the pack for me personally of LeBron years. Of course, like from a career achievement and legacy perspective, what he's doing at 40 is remarkable. And I understand why some people might put that a little bit higher. But prime LeBron in Cleveland and Miami was just a different animal. The skill, talent, the speed, the athleticism, the strength, the physicality, all that stuff that he had, like we've just never seen a player like that. So I would put those years ahead. But if you want to factor in just the novelty of what we were seeing and seeing a guy be this great this late into their career. I get why you might put it higher, but for me, it'd probably be somewhere middle of the pack among his 22 years. Next question from @DavidTransformu. Would you sign Gary Trent Jr. or Clint Capela to the taxpayer MLE? In short, yes, I would sign either one of those guys to the taxpayer MLE. I already mentioned Clint Capela as someone I would consider as a backup center. I think there is a world in which he could be a starting center, but it's not ideal. Maybe the Lakers end up flipping Gabe or Maxey or both of them plus Dalton plus a first for a wing, let's say, and decide to use one of their exceptions on a center, at which point Clint Capela might just be the best that they can do, and I would be okay with that. Again, not ideal, but there are worse options than Clint Capela for the $5.7 million taxpayer MLE. With Gary Trent, I wonder if this is actually low for him. I think he might have played his way back into the non-taxpayer MLE range with the postseason and season that he had with Milwaukee. As an aside, the Lakers could have been in the mix for Gary Trent last summer, as I reported, but they did not end up waiving Christian Wood or Cam Reddish to make the space for Gary Trent Jr. And then they ended up waiving Christian Wood and Cam Reddish during the season for lesser players. So that was one that the Lakers really fumbled last summer, and they could have had Gary Trent Jr. on a minimum contract on their bench, and they kept lesser players instead. So I think that's something that they have to address this summer with how they manage the back end of the roster. So I think this might be a little bit low for Gary Trent. Now, maybe he is available in this price range, at which point I would consider it. I did mention earlier guys like Bruce Brown, Gary Payton II, and Amir Coffey. You could throw Gary Trent Jr. into the mix, and I think he's probably the best of that group. I have some defensive concerns with him, and I understand that fans want more bench scoring and want just better three-point shooting, and I get all that. I just think the Lakers, especially on the perimeter, need to be adding better defensive players, more size and athleticism, and I don't know that Gary Trent Jr. quite checks those boxes. I think it just depends how the Lakers want to build their roster, and Gary Trent could certainly help them. I just think ultimately he might be out of their price range, but even if he is available, I think there are some greater needs on the perimeter in terms of more athleticism, quickness, size, defense, where shooting is important. I'm not saying it's not. And scoring is important. I'm not saying it's not. But I'll say, for example, like, could you imagine a Luka, Gary Trent, Austin combo together? I think that can be problematic defensively. I think you need a little bit better defense from that other perimeter spot. So I'm a little hesitant with Trent being the best fit due to some of the defensive limitations and the lack of size. But beggars can't be choosers. Lakers don't have a lot of options to improve this group. And if Gary Trent Jr. is available for the taxpayer MLE, you have to consider it. Next one from @GeneralGale. Are there rules or guidelines for what media can/can't ask? Or is it more of a, you know the boundaries and don't want to piss players off? I always wonder why certain questions aren't asked, but then I thought maybe it's not allowed. There are no specific rules or guidelines for what the media can or can't ask, but there are potential consequences. Teams can revoke your credentials, and then that becomes a league issue where you have to take it to the league, and then they have to intervene and make a potential ruling. You could also have situations where players or coaches refuse to answer your questions or give you very short, intentional answers because they don't like you or they don't like something you wrote or a way you asked the question or whatever. So there's no strict guidelines or boundaries. Like, I think a lot of it comes down to common sense, right? Like, there are rumors that will happen on social media that you wouldn't necessarily ask a player just because it's a rumor. It might be unsubstantiated, and the cost benefit analysis just doesn't really make sense. The ROI there for you might get your viral question, it'll get clipped on all social media, on Instagram, on TikTok, on X, but the cost for you is going to be potentially your credential, or maybe they revoke tier 1 access. Tier 1 means you're allowed to go in the locker room. Tier 2 means you're only allowed to go in the press room and ask the questions in the press conference. So there are ways you can be penalized depending on the question that you ask. And I think there's also just the basic respect level of being a professional journalist and asking questions that a professional journalist would ask, right? So just thinking about the decorum and the way that reporters conduct themselves, the way that they ask questions, the way that they phrase questions, I think these are all the things that coming up, someone who went to journalism school, someone who has been in the business now for 13 years, these are all the things that I'm constantly thinking about and trying to weigh when I ask certain questions. So I think in general, most media asks appropriate questions. There are exceptions, and sometimes you will phrase it the wrong way or add some context, or just maybe the way it's presented is not the best for a player or coach, and they will get upset. And we've seen plenty of those with the Lakers and other teams, other situations where the response isn't always great. But to be clear here, like asking a tough question, a hard question, a question that pisses somebody off does not mean you are asking an unprofessional question. There are going to be times when you have to ask difficult questions, when there is a report or there is something that happened that rises to the level of it's going to be uncomfortable and you have to ask it. And that's where being a professional comes in. But saying, we saw player X on TMZ out with, this person, or, there's this rumor going around that this happened, and that, like, those are some of the ones that you usually stay away from gossip unless, again, it is rising to a level of being newsworthy and rising to a level of a suspension, a fine, some type of situation like that. But we're not here to ask them about their personal lives in terms of, you're going through a divorce right now. How is that affecting your play? Like stuff like that. I think there needs to be a bit of a personal boundary, questions with kids, questions with significant others, family members, like those things, depending on the context, could be crossing a boundary. Also, some of these questions can be questions you ask these guys off to the side if you have a relationship with them. And that's part of the benefit of traveling, part of the benefit of being in the locker room, is you develop rapport with these guys where you can ask them certain questions to the side. And I can say with LeBron, there have been several situations in which the beat has collectively decided that we will ask LeBron a question off to the side and not in a press conference. So there have been times where you guys have wanted certain things asked, and we will pull him to the side after a press conference and we will ask as a group. And then depending on what is said, that will determine if we are putting that thing out or maybe we're not touching it, or, it just depends on what's going on. But we like to give him that respect, and we try to give that respect to most players. But in general, I think most journalists have a sense of what you would ask and not ask. Have to hold yourself to a high standard as a journalist, and there are potential consequences of losing your access if you ask an inappropriate or unprofessional question. So I think as long as you are within the guidelines of being appropriate and professional, you are fine. And again, that sometimes means asking tough questions that elicit anger and frustration from the player, from the coach. That's part of the job, but there are some lines that you can cross that you have to be careful with. And so I hope that answered your question. And then final one, I'm going to combine a couple. One from Amir Katz 3096. Is there a package the Lakers can build to land Bam? Reeves plus picks plus whatever else is necessary. Miami probably entering a rebuild, so he might be available. And then the next one from @_Westwood. What are the chances that Pelinka targets Jaren Jackson Jr.? 26 years old, lob threat, 3-point range, all NBA defender, potentially shot because of the Supermax, similar to Luka. To bring things full circle to the first question about the ideal offseason, if the Lakers can land a Bam Adebayo or a Jaren Jackson Jr., that would be an ideal offseason. I consider both those guys in the mix of top 30-ish, top 35, depending on where you want to put them, players in the league. And they're both big men. They would balance out the top end of the Lakers roster. So if there's a way to get them, I would be open to it. However, I think you have to look at this from the Miami and Memphis perspectives. I think oftentimes when we discuss trades, we only look at it from the team we are concerned with, right? And so with Lakers trades, it's often through the perspective of the Lakers. And with Bam, for example, he is 1 year older than Austin Reeves. Austin Reeves is about to be 27 at the end of this month. Bam is 27, going to be 28 next season. So there's a 1 year gap there. It's not like Austin's 22 and Bam's 28 and you have a 6 year window. So if you are Miami and you are trading Bam for Austin, you are getting 1 year younger. You're not really extending your contention window. And while the contract for next season is amazing, come 2026, you are going to have to pay Austin 30 plus million, could end up being 35 plus million, could end up being 40 plus million. Bam at 51 versus Austin at 40 is not the same as next season, Austin at 14, Bam at 37, right? So the value proposition changes within one more season. And then if you're Miami, you also have Tyler Hero, who's 2 years younger than Austin. So I don't see the point of flipping Bam for Austin and then having a Tyler Hero Austin core. If there was a way to add Austin to a Tyler Hero Bam core, that's a different story from Miami's perspective of upgrading your talent. But to flip Bam just for Austin, and it would be Austin and a pick. You have picks here, but the Lakers can only trade 1 first round pick. So is Austin plus a first round pick enough for Bam Adebayo? If I'm Miami, I don't think so. I would want more. And I think if they had a bidding war for Bam, they could get more than that. I think if you're a Giannis suitor, only one team is going to get him. And for the other teams that are pursuing Giannis, you can get Bam for 60% of the Giannis package, 70% of the Giannis package, maybe even less, maybe 50% of the Giannis package. I'm not quite sure what the gap's going to be there, but some of the assets you offer for Giannis, you could offer for Bam, who had a bit of a down year by his standards, but is just entering his physical prime right now. And I would not be betting against Bam long-term personally. So I think if you're Miami, you would want more theoretically than just Austin and a first for Bam. And I just don't really understand it from Miami's side. So I think that's unrealistic. In terms of Jaren Jackson Jr., he's even younger. He's 26. So he's actually younger than Austin. So you're getting older and you already have Desmond Bane and Ja Morant. So again, similar thing, Austin plus a first for Jaren Jackson. I think if you hold an open bidding war for Jaren Jackson, you can get more than that for him. So because of the Luka trade, I understand why Laker fans are feeling lucky, feeling optimistic about getting that third star, turning Austin into an all-NBA or all-star level third player. I get it. If they could do that, I think you have to explore that. I think you have to consider it. But with Bam and Jaren Jackson, I think the asking price would be higher than Austin plus 1 first. And higher in a way that the Lakers cannot reach. Like, I don't think Austin and Dalton in a first is really moving the needle enough. I think you can get better returns for these two individual players. I don't see this realistically happening. Like if I'm Miami, I'd want a younger player in their early 20s and like 2 firsts or something like that, right? If I'm Memphis, I want another big to replace Jaren Jackson. Or similar thing, if I'm just tearing it all down, then I want a younger player, early 20s, and a couple of picks. But I just don't see the fit there or that making a lot of sense. And this is why I think trading Austin is so complicated. It is hard to get equal value for him based on his contract and his contract situation and just how good he is, how important he is to the Lakers. So I think a lot of the trades I've seen are either selling low on Austin or are unrealistic in terms of the return that the Lakers would be getting for Austin. The Lakers have a couple of months to figure this out, and I will be covering it in depth. But that will do it for today's mailbag. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be off the grid in Mexico for a wedding the rest of the week. So no more content this week, unfortunately, but I will be back next week with multiple episodes to make up for only having one this week. I appreciate you all, and I will talk to you soon.